Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of 1990's Represent. We're still in our second cycle of 1992, and on this episode, we're talking about a movie. In this episode, we're talking about My Cousin Vinny, with Joe Pesci and Marisa Tomei, Fred Gwynn. Great cast overall. Really enjoyed this movie. I ended up watching it again recently, like very recently, just like earlier today, and it still holds up. It's still a lot of fun. It's like basically a courtroom comedy mixed with like a romantic comedy and stuff like that. It's just an excellent film. I have some notes here about it. We're going to go through those and we'll be grabbing them. So let's see here. There we are. So My Cousin Vinny, first released March 13th, 1992. I saw this about a year later, maybe a little bit less than a year, because I forget exactly what the turnaround was for a movie after it had left theaters, how soon it would show up on HBO. Because I think it would show up on HBO generally before you were able to like go to like a video store and rent it. So I remember seeing it in 1993. We taped it off HBO. I watched it a bunch of times that year and really enjoyed it. So saw it on HBO 1993. It's basically critically and financially successful. Had $11 million budget. It ended up grossing $64.1 million. Apparently, attorneys have also praised the film for it being accurate as far as like courtroom procedure and like investigations and things like that. It's played up for some of it is played up for comedy effect earlier in the film. But then later in the film, you actually like get like a look at like cross-examination and like things like that. So attorneys have actually praised the film based on its accuracy. It was written by Dale Lauer, and apparently there was a story he had heard about an attorney that had passed his bar exam finally on like the 13th attempt, and took that concept. I think in the film, Vinny's like takes it like 6 times, like before the movie starts, to get kind of his like lawyers like certifications and all that. So he had taken it 6 times, and then what else do we have here? Basically, it also some of the personality was kind of, according to my research, was modeled on like Sam Kinison and kind of like his kind of like attitude and style. So a little bit based on that. This is kind of one of the films where a lot of people in the film, like I didn't really notice them before seeing the film, but then like they started showing up like very often in things I had seen like very closely after it. So Lane Smith, who plays like not the DA, I think he might be like the DA, or like kind of like the prosecution of the case, was I guess in the year after it came out, so 1993. I think he's in Son-in-Law. Haven't seen Son-in-Law. I've seen like clips of it. That's about it. But then in 1993, he played. He was Perry White on the New Adventures of Lois and Clark, the Lois and Clark TV show that came out in 1993. He's on that. Mitchell Whitfield, he plays, I think Sam is the guy's name. Sam in My Cousin Vinny. But I remember like immediately after seeing this, I saw him on like an episode of Blossom. He ended up going on to play Barry, who is Rachel Green's like former like fiance on Friends, like for like a handful of episodes. James Rebhorn is also in this, and a few years later, or like 4 years later after this came out, he was I think they're like the Minister of Defense or whatever it was at Independence Day. So just kind of like actors that you see, and then they kind of just start showing up like everywhere. Apparently, actors that were considered for the role of Vinny were Andrew Dice Clay, Danny DeVito, Peter Falk, Robert De Niro, and Jim Belushi. I'm glad they went with Joe Pesci. He was basically coming off of, I think, like Lethal Weapon 2, and this came out in the same year. But like Lethal Weapon 3, Lethal Weapon 3 came out in 92, and 1989, I believe, was Lethal Weapon 2, which Joe Pesci is in, and he's been in them basically 2, 3, and very briefly in 4. But I'm glad they went with him, because I say this is kind of up there as one of his like more iconic roles. You have his great turns as kind of like mafia or mob people in like Goodfellas and Casino. Obviously, one of the wet bandits in Home Alone. You have just like, and then you have like My Cousin Vinny. So I definitely rank this up there with some of his more iconic roles. I think his roles in Goodfellas and Casinos are a little bit better, but then I would probably say like My Cousin Vinny for me is like right after that. Let's talk a little bit about Marisa Tomei. So she showed up in this film, ended up winning an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress from this film. And I remember, like, I think we had seen the movie on HBO, and I think it was before the Academy Awards because I remember, like, I think like her role or her supporting role, kind of like nomination, it was the only nomination like I had seen, or the only movie I had seen in that category was My Cousin Vinny. So this movie basically, at least for me, really put her on the map. I remember she was in something with I think like Christian Slater, like something Young at Heart, maybe Wild at Heart. I don't remember exactly what that was called, but she was in that. And she's of course gone on to be. I really liked her in Crazy Stupid Love with Steve Carell. She's like got like a kind of a small part in that movie, and then more recently she's known for playing Aunt May in the MCU Spider-Man films. But won an Academy Award for this. Like I remember that being somewhat of a shock at the time because she was up against some very kind of like serious, more dramatic actresses. But in this one, she's doing kind of like romantic comedy. She's doing kind of some just kind of straight up comedy bits as well as like rom com stuff. But then just like her courtroom scene at the end, I think that's kind of the scene that kind of clinched her kind of Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress because she's good throughout the film, but that, like when she's testifying on the stand about the different cars and like how like one of them doesn't have positive traction or positive traction or like the rear suspension and kind of just her whole testimony is amazing. And we'll get to that when we get to the actual plot. Fred Gwynn is great in this, mostly known from like playing like Herman Munster. I think I'd seen like a couple episodes of the Munsters like prior to seeing this, but this is I think like the first time I saw him in like a film, and he does a really good has a really good turn as the judge who is kind of like the foil to Vinny's character, like the super serious like Southern judge that basically is like holds Vinny in contempt of court like multiple times. He's amazing in this. What else we have here? There was apparently going to be stated. Oh yeah, there was like the stuttering lawyer. Um, I think his name, the actor's name is like Austin Pendleton, I think. And apparently he kind of regretted taking on the role because apparently he had a stutter as a kid and got over it, and then was kind of like had like I don't want to say flashbacks to it, but like playing that character kind of like drug up some like bad memories, and I think he said he kind of regretted being in the film. Let's see here. The director actually has like a law degree. So Jonathan Lynn, the director of the film, actually has like a legal degree. So I think that's how he was able to add in a lot of those like authentic like court moments and all that. There apparently was a sequel that they were going to work on at one point, and I just remember I think it ended up getting scrapped. Like Marisa Tomei was like potentially going to be in it, but I think like she ended up like dropping out, and I don't remember like if like Joe Pesci was obviously going to be in it, but I think like I think they ended up like losing both those leads. Joe Pesci's essentially retired right now, so I don't remember like when this sequel was actually going to be, if it were to have been released, like when it would have been released. But I think this is kind of better off as like a one and done. And then also like if you're losing like even if Joe Pesci was in it without Marisa Tomei, like Marisa Tomei basically is critical to the movie. So a My Cousin Vinny movie without her character would be kind of pointless, I think. There was apparently a book series that came out after of this, which I'm going to have to like look into. And then also, Joe Pesci did an album of Vinny like singing, like a singing album. All right, gonna set that aside. We're now going to jump into the plot of this film. So this is just going to be like a recap of like what happens. But it starts off with Sam and I think it was Billy, I think, or is it William or whatever. It's Ralph Macchio and like he's like Stan Rothenstein. He's like, oh, they called me Stein or whatever it was. They're driving down south, like taking a break before going to college, going to the Sack of Suds to get some groceries. they're grabbing a bunch of groceries, and there's too much to hold. So Billy Brown Maccio's character ends up putting a can of tuna in his pocket, and I think he's intending of taking it out once he gets to the register. Totally forgets to do that, and then makes a joke about like, oh, it's like, oh, I totally forgot I had this, and then a police car pulls up behind them, and actually they think they're getting arrested for shoplifting the tuna, but they're getting arrested for the murder of the clerk at the Sakasud store. So they get arrested. They essentially like Billy's character essentially confesses to it because he's like, at what point did you shoot the clerk? And the guy's like, he's like, I shot the clerk, but like asking a question. He's like, yeah, and then so basically he has like a confession on there. They end up getting Joe Pesci's character involved as a lawyer because they can't afford one. So he calls his mom, and his mom is like, well, your cousin Vinny is a lawyer, so you should get him, and that's what they do. But now they're kind of in jail. Vinny drives down, and his introduction is great because he like door pops open, you see his cowboy boots pop up, and then it does that like kind of reveal shot. Marisa Tomei gets out, and she's like taking pictures, and they get mud in their tires, and there's like they're Joe Pesci's character and Marisa Tomei's character are constantly just bickering throughout the entire film. The chemistry in this movie is great. But they get in town. They go to the jail to meet up with them, and I think there's like a miscommunication between Vinny and Sam. I think his name is Sam, and Rothenstein was called Rothenstein. And there's a miscommunication, but then they realize it's Vinny, that he hasn't taken. He's took the bar, but he had to take it 6 times, and this is his actual first case. They go like there's a constant running joke wherever Vinny and I think Moda, like, oh yeah, Lisa, stay. There's always a weird thing happening that's waking them up. So it's like a steam whistle, and then it's a bunch of pigs and like a farm, and then they go camping, and it's like a screech owl that like wakes them up in the middle of the night. But they basically they take Vinny on to be their lawyer. The arraignment doesn't go well. The arraignment he gets thrown into contempt of court. He's constantly also like lying about his identity. He's like, oh, I've done these trials in like New York, just to kind of impress the judge, which ends up kind of like coming back to bite him like a couple times. But they basically are like not guilty. He gets thrown in contempt. He gets thrown in jail. There was a thing where Lisa had like hustled some money out of money, and they try to collect that money. It's kind of like a running thing where like there's like. It was a game of pool. He's like, they're going to fight over it. So it was like $200 that like they owed him. But then they end up getting enough evidence that they can go to trial. Vinny doesn't cross-examine any of the witnesses. And Lane Smith is basically the prosecution. He meets up with Vinny and basically do their arraignment. At this point, he basically blows the arraignment, and Rothenstein is having second thoughts, and he hires like basically like a public defender to kind of represent him. And at this point, I think they have there's also the whole breakfast scene where they're like the menu is literally breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's like eggs and grits and all that. It's like kind of that's like the movie where I first learned what grits were. But they then he meets up with the prosecution, like Lane Smith's character, and he's like, I'm gonna try to get files from him. I'm gonna try to get his files, and then he's like, oh yeah, like we'll get you those files. And then Lisa eventually tells him, he's like, hey, he gave you those files because he had to. It's like you have like you're entitled to those like documents. So basically, like it's like the whole like disclosure thing. But so he offers them the chance to use like their hunting cabin, and they go there, and there's like a screech owl that wakes them up. They sleep in their car. There's a bunch of mud, like it rains, and then his suit gets ruined, so he has to basically get this weird like usher suit like at like a secondhand store, and he actually does the trial very very well. Rothstein eventually ends up firing the public defender and going with Vinny, and Vinny basically is able to say like, well, the guy like one witness like he was like the grits don't cook fast enough, like they wouldn't have cooked in that amount of time. The other person's like you were able to positively identify them through like this dirty window with all these trees and bushes around it. And the final person, they had like huge glasses, like very thick glasses, and they like even from far away you couldn't really see. So those witnesses, essentially, there was a reasonable doubt that wasn't them. Um, he asked for like a continuance to get this new information because there was like an FBI not investigator, but he's like a statistician. He's like that's the James Rapport character. Comes in and says that this model of the tires it left residue on the ground is the same tires that is on the defendant's car. But then he Mona Lisa and him have a fight because there's like he sees the track marks. He's like all these like really bad photos, and the track marks are like, well, like she can definitely identify that like the track marks on the ground are not from the car of the defendants. So he eventually gets her to go back. She does her whole really great testimony. She's like, hey, the only car that could have done this like had to have like a independent rear suspension, and also would have to have positive traction. And it was this model car and not the car that the defendants have. And then eventually, of course, the state dismisses all charges. Basically, the defendants get off. They obviously didn't do it. And also, like I think, like he had Bruce McGill's character, the sheriff, run some information, and they found a car that was similar, like that car that could have done it somewhere in Georgia, and they had an arrest and found the actual murder weapon there. And then they all leave the courtroom, and that's basically the end of the film. But it's a great comedy. It's got great characters from, especially Joe Pesci and Marisa Tomei, Fred Gwynne as well. Ralph Macchio doesn't really have a whole lot to do with the movie. He's like it's mostly Joe Pesci, Marisa Tomei, and Fred Gwynne. But excellent film. I'd highly recommend it if you haven't watched it. And it's just a great 90s film. One of my favorite films. I hadn't watched it in a little while, and it definitely still holds up, and it's still a lot of fun. But that's going to do it for this video. So remember to like, comment, share, and subscribe. We'll be back again in a few days with another video. Till then, thanks again for watching, and take care.